Hi, this is Roger Helland, Prayer Ambassador of the Evangelical Fellowship of Canada. As a former pastor and denominational leader and adjunct professor, I love churches and church leaders with a flaming passion to see flourishing congregations. You know, we've all explored church growth and church health and mission, but in today's anxious world, there's a trumpet call for renewal and revival. Richard Owen Roberts, late president of International Awakening Ministries, who worked with the Billy Graham Evangelistic Association, stated that the sobering truth is that the greatest hindrance to the growth of Christianity in today's world is the absence of the manifest presence of God from the church. And in a 2012 study on what people experience in churches, Barna Research Group found that most people, 66%, feel they've had a real and personal connection with God while attending church services. However, that means 1/3 of those who have attended a church service in the past have never felt God's presence while in a church setting. Also, when asked about the frequency, most of those who have attended church describe those encounters as rare. Without God's manifest presence, can congregations actually flourish? Psalm 16:11 announces, "You make known to me the path of life, and in your presence there is fullness of joy, and at your right hand are pleasures forevermore." In the Old Testament, we know that Jerusalem, the temple, was the habitation of God's presence. And we know that in the New Testament, the church is the habitation of God's presence, his temple by the Spirit. And when people taste and see the Lord is good, nothing else will satisfy them. I've encountered, as scores of others have, times in private and public settings where God's presence was so strong it felt thick, it felt weighty and electric, where I was speechless and I couldn't move and I was drawn to tears or joy. And to encounter God's presence is to personally know his kavod, the Hebrew word for glory. Habakkuk 2:14 announces, "For the earth will be filled with the knowledge of his glory as the waters cover the sea," the kavod of God. Presence-centered churches experience supernatural transformation, healing, and holiness. A.W. Tozer advised that the kind of revival we need today is a revival of the reverence and sacredness in the presence of God. And this needs to happen personally and then flow over into the church setting. And while many churches became seeker-centered or purpose-centered or gospel-centered or even mission-centered, I believe they should become presence-centered. Psalm 105:4 invites us to seek the Lord and his strength and to seek his presence continually. This means to seek God's face rather than his hand. The core discipleship practice to cultivate a presence-centered church is scripture-fed and spirit-led private and public prayer. While most churches are centered around songs and sermons or the sacraments, Jesus said, "My house, my temple, the place of God's presence, shall be a house of prayer." To what extent is prayer a core practice in your church to the same degree as songs, sermons, or the sacraments are? Daniel Henderson argues that prayerlessness is our declaration of independence from God. John Wesley advised that the neglect of prayer is a grand hindrance to holiness. And John Calvin asserted prayer is the chief exercise of faith. In 2021, the Flourishing Congregations Institute published the results of their nationwide survey that determined the top 6 most important parish and congregational life elements that impacted their spiritual life and discipleship. Preaching and teaching ranked first, music and singing ranked second, the Eucharist, communion, ranked third, while prayer actually ranked fifth, below volunteering in the church and just above small groups. So what if your congregation, like Center Street Church in Calgary, decided to become a praying church, a house of prayer? Try to cut 10 minutes from the singing, 10 minutes from the sermon, and add 15 minutes of carefully planned prayer into your worship services. So for a biblical and practical guide on how to seek, experience, and host God's presence in your discipleship, in your home, in your workplace, and in your church for daily renewal and joy, please see my book, Pursuing God's Presence. And in the next 3 videos, my friends Marilyn Byberg, Ashwin Ramani, and Sarah Maynard will present presence-centered prayer, preaching, and sacraments for a flourishing congregation. May God empower you to cultivate a presence-centered church.